Hey guys, Professor Bill, Comic Book University. I'm going to be talking about Alan Moore and David Lloyd's V for Vendetta. Now, I thought about the idea of going out and getting the mask and doing all this stuff, and I got a bunch of masks on my wall, but unfortunately that is not one of my masks. In the spirit of the actual comic, I felt that getting the mask would be something wrong, would be something else. The way that I look at it is very simply, Alan Moore, as it's described in this comic book, didn't want us to necessarily follow the path of V. I'm going to get into a lot more of all that. We're going to actually have a breakdown of V himself. We're going to have a breakdown of at least a quick comparison between the movie and the comic book, graphic novel, however you want to look at it. It was actually 10 issues of a graphic novel released in 1988 before it actually got put together into a graphic novel. So there's that. But push comes to shove, I'm also only going to really, be talking about the first issue of the comic book. But I will be doing an overall of everything. So let's get right into this. We're going to start off in Great Britain. Now, this is actually important for everything later on. This is Great Britain. So there's a lot going on here. There's a voice coming over a radio, and it's called The Voice of Fate. And there's a sign up on a wall that says strength through purity, purity through faith. And we're looking at a girl named Evie Hammond. Whether Evie Hammond, Evie Hammond, whatever. Her name actually represents a lot. It really does. And we'll try and get into a little bit more of that later. She is 16 years old. She works in a munitions factory. And her story is going to come up a little bit later. We don't even know her name when this first begins. She is sitting in front of a mirror, and she's putting on makeup. And it's a lot of makeup, like streetwalker makeup. Now, at the same exact time, V is walking up to his mirror in his shadow gallery, and he is putting on his mask and his wig and his cloak, his outfit, putting up his weapons and all that good stuff. So they're both dressing at the same time. Now, I know this is an Alan Moore book, but at the same time, David Lloyd, the artist, he had about as much to do with this comic book as Alan Moore did, to say the least. The visual representations in here are fantastic. We can notice right away that V and Evie are doing the same thing at the same time, and they even look similar. You can see the red in the cheekbones of the mask, while at the same time with her, she's painting on her mask, and she's doing the pink blush on the sides and whatnot. Now, what she's doing is she's going out because she's going to start her first day at 16 years old. She just turned 16 the month prior. She was born in September, she says. So, 2 months prior. And this is the 5th of November itself. Yes, remember the 5th of November. All that good stuff with the anarchist handbook saying. Anyway, the Guy Fawkes mask, everything. Look, she's going out to become a prostitute. Why? Because she works at this munitions factory, but she's not making nearly enough. It's a communist sort of regime where people are put to work. Doesn't matter what they're good at, doesn't matter anything, just factory work. Shut up, get in there when the bell sounds, do your job, that's that. So she's not making nearly enough. She's starving like everybody else out there. And all of her friends, when they were around 16 years of age, they went out and they prostituted themselves. Sorry, I'm human. So that's just the way that she expects to make a little bit extra money. That's the oldest profession, right? There's a reason why it's called that. It's because it's the oldest profession. So when she goes out, the very first person she walks up and propositions is this guy. And he laughs at her. It's like, this is obviously your first time. And he seems like he's going to be kind of sweet and whatnot, And she's like relaying a lot of information to him. Yeah, I work at this factory and it's just not enough. You know how it is. And he says, yeah, well, I could tell that you're new because you didn't really put out your feelers or anything like that. And boom, pulls out his badge. He's a cop. More specifically, he's part of this Secret Service police. They actually have a specific name for it. The Vice Detail, and they're on stakeout, and there are 5 of them. His other 4 cronies come out of the shadows, and she's in what did she do? In violation of a class 5 felony or offense. I think they use the word offense as opposed to felony. I'm American. What are you gonna do? So she's like, oh no, like this was really my first time. It really was. I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. They don't care. Plus, on top of that, since it's only class H, it's not like a huge deal, and it's pointed out. It's not even insinuated. It's pointed out directly. She's not doing any harm to anyone but herself. She's not out there, vandalizing or doing anything like that. She's just going out there doing what some people would consider to be immoral. So what? So what? She's not hurting anybody but herself. And they look at it as, well, we're allowed to do whatever we want to you. That's actually the punishment. A class H, we can do whatever we want. So they're planning on actually doing exactly that to her and then killing her. Yeah. Now, she's obviously going to be traumatized by this, and you get to experience it later on. She's only a dumb 16-year-old little girl she hasn't had a father since for the past 4+ years. You know what I'm saying? So, I mean, like, wow. And her mother is gone. Her mother was gone years before that, and it's a violent, war-torn society. We'll get more into that in a little bit. V comes out of the shadows. Now, I know in the movies they show that he just starts, doing the whole vivacious vivisection of vicarious, voluptuous vivacity. That's not even a word, but he's just basically, he sounds like, you ever seen that one episode of Friends where Joey buys that book from, I think it was actually from Penn Jillette from Penn and Teller. I think he buys the V book from him. Maybe it was you. I thought it was V. Anyway, everything he keeps on saying is like volcanoes, whatever. That's where everything comes from. Now, that didn't happen in this book. On top of that, he doesn't pull out his knives in this particular battle. Instead, what happens is he puts his hand up and it's in a fist, and the guy grabs his wrist and it's like, you're coming with me. V pulls his left hand back, and the guy's holding this fist. It's a prop fist. It's like, what the heck is this? And he moves faster than the eye can follow and moves in front of everybody, in front of Evie, and puts his hand out, and tear gas shoots out. It's like, oh my God. So they're like, what are we going to do? Oh man. And I could tell you from being in the Army, tear gas, CS gas specifically, it's bad. It's really bad. You're incapacitated. There's nothing you could do. Done. So he gets out of there. And the one guy's sitting there holding the fist. Well, I got the fist. What should I do with it? And it blows up. Now, there were 5 of these guys, and they're considered fingermen. So 5 fingermen. Yeah, you get the hint. And we are going to get more into that in just a few seconds. So 3 of them are dead. There's only 2 left. 2, like in the shape of a V. Now, there's a lot of alliteration and analogy here. Every single each comic, each individual of these 10 comics has about 4 chapters in them. Every single chapter in all of the comics have they start with the letter V. So there's victory and Valhalla, like all the different V words you could possibly imagine, and then a couple other really ingenious ones. Pretty cool. I like that. On top of that, you're going to find a whole bunch of more alliteration like that. V was in room 5 in, for crying out loud, what was that called? Hillhark? Geez, Lusk Hill. Lusk Hill Resettlement Camp. It's a concentration camp. And he, which means that he was one of the undesirables. Go figure. Was he Jewish? Was he a homosexual? Who knows? But he was in there, and he was one of the people being experimented on. That's a big deal for this. Almost glossed over, but it is a big deal for the reason why he's going out there. This is called V for Vendetta more than anything else. V is actually going out there to get revenge on people, while on top of that trying to wake people up. And what happens is when he brings Evie, and mind you, there's E-V, yeah, Evie back to his location, the Shadow Gallery. He explains certain things to her. She's like, what is this music playing? It's some Motown stuff, and he's got so many different novels out there, like these great books, these works of literature. It's like, oh my God, this is great. Film, music, you name it. He's got art. He has culture, something that was taken away from people. Now, I fall into this sometimes myself. I'm so caught up in the idea that everybody's all about the culture and the art and blah, 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 blah in the States and various other places. But meanwhile, we're falling so behind on the standards of STEM, the acronym, science, technology, engineering. I was in engineering and mathematics. We've fallen so behind in these things that I just like, no, more of the STEM, more of the STEM. But yeah, I understand that culture is extremely important also. So he's indoctrinating her in these things. Now, he's not sitting down and necessarily watching movies with her. He's got way too much to do, The movie kind of shows that they're sitting down watching the Count of Monte Cristo and stuff like that. Not the case. So they're sitting down there. They're having a conversation. They're talking about different things. She's resting. She's eating. Imagine that. She actually gets to eat. And she's basically going through a form of therapy, trying to understand, what had just happened to her, what could have happened, because a lot of people go, oh, she was stupid. Enough with the victim blaming. The idea is that she was trying to survive. The only way that she knew how to survive. That's what she knew. So, and she starts to become aware that that's all that she knows. She starts to become aware of her own ignorance throughout the course of this comic. She's growing up. This is a coming of age book for her. She does grow up to be what would be considered a terrorist, but at the same time, you know what? We'll get more into that. So we go on, we get to see the leader. All right, we get to see the leader, and he's a very interesting character because he's supposed to be the main bad guy of this book. The problem is he's not the main bad guy of the book. There is no main bad guy in the book. Unless you want to consider it's the people, all the people who he rules over. That sounds weird, right? I'm going to get into that. Seriously, it's good stuff. I very often consider or talk to people about how this is the best book that Alan Moore has ever worked on. This is, in my opinion, this is the best he's ever done. It's genius, pure and simple. And I know I hear a lot of people saying bad things about him once in a while. They call him crazy. They call him a kook. He's kooky, but at the same time, so is Albert Einstein. So yeah, I'm making that comparison for a reason, for a good reason. He is kooky, but he is also a genius. The way that he's able to put some of these things together is amazing. So what happens at this point, let's see where exactly I wanted to go with this. He takes, I completely missed over a really huge part of this. Before he takes Evie back to the Shadow Gallery, what he does is he takes her to the top of this rooftop and says, look out over there. And the Parliament building blows up. It's like, oh my God, did you do that? He's like, I did that. No, really, did you do that? No, I really did that. And his voice is amazing because you have to be able to, of course, hear his voice in the comic book. They do a really good job of that because his speech, what do they call the speech? It's not a speech bubble, but whatever it is, the speech bubbles. They have a curvy line to it going to him, indicating that it's a very to me at least, that's a very flowery voice. Maybe it sounds like Agent Smith from The Matrix. Maybe it does. Maybe it sounds a little bit like the Red Skull. But the idea is that it's given a very distinct voice. And it's excellent. It's excellent the way that this is pulled off. So after the Parliament building blows up and she's in shock and awe of this, all of a sudden fireworks go up. Now the idea that people haven't seen fireworks in forever. So they're really trying to take away everything of beauty in this land, which is sad, man. It's sad. It's really sad. It's messed up. Everything has to be about the military. Everything has to be about, hearing the voice on the radio, on the hour, at the hour, every hour. Like, this is what you can expect. This is what you get. So it's very big brothery. And the movie did do a good job of doing that. It's just this is a British comic. The movie is an American movie. I don't care if they did the voice, and Natalie Portman did and they went over there and they took her. You could you could do an accent and whatnot, but there were clearly political annotations there meant for America, not for Britain. And I'm not British, so I'm positive that there's so much in this comic that I've missed. But, my own research and whatnot, talking to people about the comic, listening to interviews and things like that, you'll learn a lot more. This was essentially in response to, at the time at least, current politics going on in Britain, Margaret Thatcher's idea. This is actually probably a good time to talk about the history of the history of that world that this is in, because V actually does start talking to her. She says, she's 16, so she was born in, let's say, 1981, I believe it would be. So this is, 1988. She's 16 years old, 1988. So yeah, so she was born in 81. So that does put this in the future. Sorry, I knew all that stuff, but this does put this in the future, like approximately 10 years or so, for at the time. So like 1997. The idea is that it is supposed to be a story about the future, but no good story about the future is ever about the future. It's about the present and what has led up to the present, hence the past, the relevant past. And that's exactly what's going on here. There was nuclear war. The Labor Party got in charge, and that wasn't necessarily a bad thing. It's good for the workers, you know what I'm saying? But at the same time, it was a weak Labor Party. That's what they're indicating. I'm strong on unions. I believe unions are a great thing. It's one of the only things that protect workers. Otherwise, you're at the mercy of your boss and the corporate heads, who are usually faceless. Who here has ever actually met their real ultimate boss, the owner or owners or shareholders, whatever, of the company? Very few people, right? So in order to understand this, the Labor Party was put in charge, but it was a very weak Labor Party. The only thing that ran on was the idea of getting the American missiles out of Britain. Was this a good thing? Was it a bad thing? Unknown. Maybe they never even actually succeeded in it. The idea is that the world went nuclear. Now, Britain never actually got hit directly, but there was a lot of indirect attack. Africa, they kept on saying, is gone. There is no more Africa. Not sunk into the sea. It's not Atlantis, Africantis. That would be cool. The idea is that it was nuked and nothing civilized there anymore. It's wasted. It's gone. Most of Europe met the same fate. So all sorts of different places in the world, all sorts of messed up. Britain actually had it. You could consider it better because they didn't all die at the same time. There was no more real effective government. And the fact that there has always been this big government the whole time, the people were waiting for the government to do something. They kept on waiting for somebody to do something. Anybody. They weren't real. And this is the message that Alan Moore is trying to get, forth to the people, to empower the people, to make them understand. You can't sit on your laurels. You can't rest on your laurels, as the idiom goes. You can't wait for somebody to do stuff for you, to fix things for you. And that is so relevant even to this very day. To give you a good idea of just how relevant it was, the British broadcast in the very beginning, it talks about making Britain great again. Alan Moore is a genius. So anyway, what happens here is that there's rioting and looting and all sorts of bad stuff going on, and people they're like, okay, well, we got to just move from here. It's bad here. We got to move someplace else. But as it turns out, it's worse in other places. So no matter what they're thinking about doing, moving out to the country or whatever, it's just bad. It's bad all around. Now, at one point, these people get in charge. They're called Norsefire. Was that what they were called? I can't remember. Yep, Norsefire. This group called Norsefire comes along, and what happens? They start trying to bring order to things. They bring safety, and that's good. That's a really good thing. But in order to bring safety, they have to get rid of the bad elements. So they get rid of the black people. Eventually, they start moving out all the black people, and for the most, but they don't say that people put up a big fight over it. So I guess, there was a lot of excuses. Oh, well, yeah, they're a bad element. Then they start moving out the Pakistanis. Now, by that, they're, of course, indicating all of the East Asians, anybody who's just basically not white. The problem is they start going after white people too. But which white people? They start going after the gay people. They go after all the homosexuals. Wow. Yeah, because that's definitely subversive, right? Everything they're doing, they're basically all racists. Now, I don't like the idea that it's necessarily called Norse fire because Norse doesn't have to mean racist. The problem is that Adolf Hitler did use a lot of that, like even the word, the term Aryan, and the swastika itself. It's all Norse, and he was known for his affiliation with his affection, at the very least, for Norse mythos and rune magic and things like that, the occult along those lines. The Captain America books have played on that a lot with the Red Skull and whatnot. So. Yeah, it's not that hard to make that generalization. I get it. Nonetheless, what happens at this point is these guys come in, they take everything over, and they start putting people into these concentration camps. But of course, you can't call a thing if it's a bad thing. You have to put a good spin on it. So it's not a concentration camp, it's a resettlement camp. Because if it's a resettlement camp, you could say, oh, it's separate but equal, Look, black people and white people simply aren't going to live together right, okay? So, what we decide to do is separate them. You white people, you'll stay here, we'll just move the black people over there. It's just a resettlement. The problem is that we're eventually going to kill all of these people. And that's what happens. All these people, they're just going to be burned alive in ovens, basically. That's exactly what winds up happening. So, wow. And the voice of fate, this guy on the radio who is associated with the supercomputer called Fate, that's in this comic book, the supreme leader, the leader of Britain. He's a scared little guy, but he's not necessarily a bad guy, and they really get into that in book 2. In book 1, they show him as being really scary. He goes to and starts calling people up. He's having video conferences with people. He's like, okay, I want to talk with the eyes. What's going on with the eyes? Now, the eyes are basically the CCTV. If you know anything about England, about Britain, Great Britain, like there's closed caption television, CCTV, everywhere. It's hard to get away with anything there because there are just so many cameras and they're all on closed circuit. So they all come back to a location and they can go through all the feed and facial recognition. Here they even talk about retinal recognition and everything, retinal identity. But since V's wearing the mask, they can't actually connect the two. They can't figure out who he is. So, yeah, a lot of foreshadowing in this. A lot of foreshadowing. 1988, come on. So, and of course, he didn't just make it in 1988. He thought this through, at least a year in advance. So, crying out loud, before the internet even came out. So, then he starts talking to the ears. The ears are a different form of surveillance. These are the people listening into all the phone conversations. Patriot Act, anyone? So then he starts talking to the nose. The nose are the people, they're basically like the New Scotland Yard. And they are actually called the New Scotland Yard. Are they the exact same? I'm not sure. It's hard to really put everything together, but these are the people who literally have boots on the ground. They're not just anybody who's walking around and doing detective work like the local police force. No. They're a very specific, elite, or at least tasked group to, have boots on the ground and go in, sniff, nose to the ground and all that stuff, and actually start investigating, taking samples and whatever. So he's talking to all these people, and this guy, Mr. Almond, a bitter almond, he's being blamed for a lot of this. He's the finger. So he's basically the guy in charge of the police who go out there, all these detectives, like these 3 of 5 who were killed by V in that alley. They are the hands, so they've got their their fingers in everything, and all that's left is the taste, right? Well, instead they do the mouth, so the voice, right? That Jordan Tower, that's actually where they've got the propagation center, where the reports go out on the news, whether it's TV or radio, whatever it is, it goes out there, and that's the information that you're given. So this is the mouth. So all five senses are being covered here by Alan Moore, and it's freaking genius. Yeah, I'm going to say that a lot in this. Deal with it. It's genius because when you think about your senses, that means that they are aware of everything. This leader is aware of everything that's going on, everything that's happening. They're integrated into every single part of our society with knowing the smell, touch, taste, the sight, the sound, everything. They can basically know what we're thinking. Thought control. If you don't realize that this was so heavily based on 1984, go and read 1984, then come back and read Alan Moore's book. All right, this is, wow, crazy. So crazy. So at this point, all of this is there. This is, for the most part, the voice himself is, the voice of fate is caught. He's in a train and he's just out there, and he used to be in the military. And what it was is that he actually used to be in charge of that relocation camp, that concentration camp, voice of the Lusk Hill resettlement concentration camp. And what do you call it? He gets captured by V. Now it's funny because he has two fingers with him. We're supposed to guard him, And it seems as though they are killed by V with a finger. Interesting. So like, just like that. And he is taken away. The voice of fate is taken away, and he is re-educated himself. Now, you get to learn a whole lot more about V in the books that come up, but what you start to come across is that this guy was in charge of this concentration camp, had to go and see all these people constantly being brought in and inspect and everything. And then he would inspect the 5 rooms. Were there only 5 rooms? I don't know. But the 5th room, Roman numeral V, yeah, go figure. That's where V was kept. He was an undesirable, and he was pumped with all sorts of drugs, experimental drugs. They're trying to figure out whatever, and that's what actually gave him a psychosis. V is not necessarily a superhuman in any way, shape, or form, except I guess that he can call on his adrenaline anytime he wants, and he's really smart. But and he's a fantastic fighter, But for the most part, yeah, he's a regular guy, but he is crazy. He's absolutely crazy. Make no mistake about that. This dude's nuts. All right. But anyway, the next book is going to go into it. They're going to talk about Adam Susan. He is the leader. They actually give him a name. And they go into the idea that he's not necessarily evil. See, he is in charge of Norse Fire. They're not really called that anymore. You know what I'm saying? It's now the British government. You don't you don't keep the revolutionary name. Now you change it. You say, now we're back to normal. But what's normal? Whatever we tell you. The idea is that he saw that the only freedom that people had were the freedom to suffer, the freedom to starve, the freedom to die, and it's not what he wanted. So he felt that the best way to be free was to bring order to everything. And the more order, the more freedom that people had. He couldn't see that. He suddenly became the oppressor, and he became the elite, that 1%. He could no longer relate to people anymore. That's just his thing. And he's more than happy to kill people, I mean, realistically, not relating to people, I don't think I really touched on that enough. His lover, his bride, is the computer, fate. This supercomputer that's touched into everything, all 5 senses, It's everything and everywhere. That's actually one of the tricks, is how V is able to be everywhere at the same time, it seems, and always know what's going on and never actually get caught. He's tapped into fate also. This is also a play on religion. It's one thing to be religious. Hey, I'm religious, but make no mistake, with religion eventually comes dogma. There's a lot of people who will take some kind of scripture and add their own dogmatic view to it. And Alan Moore taps into this beautifully. And it's a form of control. That's what it is. Religion, dogmatic religion, is a form of control. And it's a way of keeping people in order and making things sussing out the bad from the good. It's literally taking a very Randian philosophy. It's very much, Ayn Rand, Atlas Shrugged. Good book to understand what not to do. You can read The Fountainhead. There's a whole bunch of good stuff. The idea that people are inherently good or evil, that's kind of what religion does. You're either good or you're evil. You're either blessed or you're a sinner. That's what Alan Moore is really focusing on here. He's not focusing on the good things that religion brings or necessarily anything else. He's looking at what dogmatic religion does, meaning people who take scripture and twist it to their own ways and then hand it to you and say, this is that, but it's not. But you don't know any better. So you have to do what I say. I'm in touch with God. There's a lot there. There's a whole lot there, and it's amazing how he pulls it off. Guys, I highly recommend going out and grabbing the graphic novel. You want the mask, grab the mask, by all means. It's really good stuff. Now, to compare the movie with the book, I would have to say that they're both different. To come down hard on the movie, and look, listen, I 100% support the idea that Alan Moore will not allow his name to be attached to any movie. If he's not the guy who's talking to the director, then why should he? Because it's not the work that he did. And I love that about him. That is something to be admired. It's not something to insult the guy about. There's something to genuinely try and emulate. This isn't my work. You could say based on, absolutely say it's based on my work. It's absolutely based on my work. Everybody knows it's based on my work, darn it. But do not say that I had a part in making this film, because I didn't. And this film is not my book. It's not the same. So, and realistically, you can make a good movie. You can absolutely make a good movie. But to make a good comic book movie, can't really be based on an actual comic book directly. It can't be that. I mean, how do you put 10 issues of a comic book conglomerated together into a graphic novel and stick it in a 2-hour or so movie? I mean, really? You're going to miss on some things. And you've got to change some things to make them, go faster in a movie. This could be a Netflix series. Saying something along those lines. Oh, I would love it. And my recommendation is crawl on your hands and knees if you have to get Alan Moore to actually sign on and say, yes, I will oversee this. Because it might get him to start writing comic books again, which I would greatly appreciate. So the difference between the movie and the comic is a British comic. The movie is an American movie that claims to be British, but it's not. It's a huge play on the Bush administration, which is, Wachowskis. The Wachowski siblings, they've got a feeling of religion and political animosity in, I think, all of their films. I don't know if they did in Speed Racer, but pretty much, I never watched Speed Racer, but pretty much all of their films, that's what they do. And it's good. It's good. It's just not the book. It's not trying to downplay the movies at all. The movie has its place in history. It's good. It is good, but it's not the book. It's different. And as long as it's understood when you watch the movie that this is V for Vendetta, the American version, then that should be pretty easy to stomach. I think that, honestly, the British could very easily make their own version of a V for Vendetta movie. And they should. It's theirs, But at the same time, India could make one. China could make one. Whoever, any country in the world could make one. Every country in some way should. Because this does promote the idea of anarchy. But at the same time, it's got to be understood what anarchy actually is. You look up anarchy instead of just listening to other people tell you, oh, it's overthrowing the government. Yeah, it kind of is. and but it's not chaos. Anarchy doesn't mean chaos. It means having a smaller government, a minimalist government, and putting the power in the hands of the people. Why did I say before that the people are actually the bad guys here? It is a form of victim blaming, but when you just defer to someone else, oh, you'll make it better. Why don't you make it better? Why aren't you the person? Why aren't you the people? Why aren't we the people? Like that's what the Constitution of the American government states. We the people. Not, yeah, the government, or yeah, the 1%. Yes, this is political. This is a political book. The idea is that the power should be in the hands of the people. It's the reason why there's a Second Amendment. So you can't take my liberty by force. Well, not easily, at least. The idea of all these smaller governments and smaller governments and smaller governments still all responding to the top government, like it's, oof. Here, it's on my own that I say that it is important to remember that the American government, the Constitution, it was written and founded by revolutionaries. So this comic is not so far-fetched from what we know. It's not so far-fetched from what we have, what our founding fathers were in and of themselves. So it's really a work of art. This book, I love this book. I know a lot of people's go-to Alan Moore book is The Watchman. The Watchman is great. The Watchman is about superheroes. I'm not a superhero. I'm a person. This book is about me. This book is about us. And maybe, some people are going to think that's far-fetched. It's really not. Just read the book. And honestly, I highly recommend reading the book. V is the protagonist in this, but he's not the good guy. That's what's funny. He's not the good guy. He's crazy. He is out for vendetta. He is out, like, he went and he blew up the Parliament building, for crying out loud. If there was one innocent cleaning person just trying to make a living in there who got killed or even hurt, if a bit of that rubble fell on the ground, and hurt somebody, like it's a terroristic act. That's what it is. It's a terroristic act. Now, it should also be understood in the minds of, I forget who exactly said it. And shame on me for forgetting it. But somebody I remember did one time say, if you keep taking away people's ability to protest peacefully, they're going to have to start protesting violently. You get it? So when you're just doing a regular protest, and people come up and they try to shut you up, they try to use political correctness, or they try and find ways to, or they send the police in after you. You're having a quiet civil protest, or even if it's loud, oh my God, they're so loud, whatever. If you're just having a form of civil disturbance, which is your right, First Amendment. No, they're more than, we started with 10 amendments, for crying out loud. We didn't start with just the Constitution. So the idea that we actually are allowed to protest, against anything. You have the right to be heard. You have the right to be heard. You don't have the right for it to be acted upon, but you do have the right to be heard. And when people take away your right to be heard, which means your freedom of speech, you're going to try and find another way to be heard, and it's usually going to be violent. And then of course they're going to call you a terrorist and all sorts of things, and that's what this book is telling us. That's what this book is doing. Now, we didn't see everybody come out, like in the movie you saw everybody come out dressed like V. That didn't happen in the book, but that's the spirit of what happened. It was a rushed way of it. Now, I'll give it away, because seeing how it happens, V does die in the book, so does the leader. And they both die at about the same exact moment. The fatal blow comes within the same moment. The leader's just not quite as physically strong as, or psycho strong-willed as V is, but they both do die. Now, one of the most beautiful things about this book, and I could tell you in exasperating detail, I won't. I will tell you what happens, but even if I told you in great detail, seeing it is so much greater than anything I could possibly put words to. When V is actually dead, And I got to make my screensaver longer. When V actually does die, Evie goes up and she's thinking to unmask him. And she does. Several times. What? Several times she unmasks him, and each time it's a different face. Because it's all happening in her mind. In her mind, she unmasks him so many times, and she tries to imagine what he's going to look like. She finally resolves herself to the idea that it's not her father. So anybody, whoever it is, whether it's a nobody who became somebody as V, or somebody and is now reduced to a nobody in V, whoever it is, taking that mask off, actually having a face to that name, a face to that behind that mask, is going to reduce who the person actually is. So she doesn't want to know who the person is behind V. She knows that it's V, and that's what matters. That's what matters. She does, however, unmask him one last time in her mind. And the face under the mask, that's what makes all the difference. That's what gives her her true power, her true purpose. That is the part that's so amazing. This book is about telling the people to wake up, to stop expecting that somebody's going to fix it for them, because the person who fixes it for you may be a fascist government like the Nazi Party, and they're going to make it happen by sending brown coats to round people up and to get rid of dissonance. Evie's father, case in point, Evie's father, when he was taken away when she was only 12, he was taken away not because he's black or Pakistani or because he's a homosexual, but because once, years ago when he was younger, he was a member of a socialist party. Something just that simple. Any reason that they have, they will, that very famous poem, eventually they came for me. That's what this book is about, and the book is genius. And you read it, and then you read it again. And you see all the things that you missed. And then you wonder, are there still things that I missed? And you start thinking to make time to read it again. Guys, this is an amazing book, an absolutely amazing book. These 10 comics put together in a graphic novel. If you don't own this in your collection, may I make a recommendation to rectify that situation? Yeah. Anyway, guys, that's all I got. One of the absolute, hands down, best graphic novels ever made. Ever made. That's all I got. Professor Bell, Comic Book University. Class dismissed.